All right, welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on this 21st day of May 2025. Just to reintroduce the panelists, George Njega is the President, Architectural Association of Kenya. Yusuf Charles is the Chairperson, National Housing Corporation. Johanna Ngeno is the Chairperson, Housing, Urban Planning and Public Works Committee at the National Assembly, and Professor Alfred Omenya is an architect and an urban developer. We're here to talk about the story of the affordable housing program. You may recall the promise was to have 250,000 houses every year, and the government, of course, the economy was already producing about 50,000, so the government was coming and see how to build 200,000 of affordable housing units. So far, I think towards the end of last year, the president spoke of 4,888 units that were ready by then. There's a bit of coverage in the papers. Page 8 of the Daily Nation talks about Mukuru residents. We now have houses with water, toilet and gas. Majority of beneficiaries who received their keys have been living in makeshift iron sheet houses. Nairobi slum dwellers thrilled as President Ruto hands over the keys to 1,080 units. And I want to begin with the chairperson of the Housing Committee at the National Assembly, Mheshimiwa Johanna Ngeno. Good morning.
Good morning.
And it's good to see you on Daybreak after so long. But talk to us about what you witnessed yesterday, but also comparing the vision or the promise versus what the government has been able to achieve so far.
Thank you so much. I think yesterday was one of the greatest moments, especially for the country, for the leadership, both the executive and, of course, the legislature. I think that was one of the moments where everybody was feeling like the promises which were made to the people of this republic were met. I remember the question of housing is entrenched in the Constitution, where citizens have a right to good housing, good shelter, proper sanitation. It is a provision in the Constitution, and therefore the only question which has been very difficult to deal with was how do we achieve that constitutional provision. And I think many governments have tried to ensure that there is proper housing and people access good sanitation. And it has been a dream that nobody has ever achieved until the current president took a firm position on how to deal with that particular matter. And that is how the law was put in place, which was actually drafted and tabled before Parliament. And we did the public participation, and the law was put in place. And I think that is how yesterday's achievement was made. So I want to say that the achievement of yesterday was not only for the president, it was for the people of this country, because it was a proper indication that firm decisions sometimes yield good results. And when you look at the people, you know, it was, I think the major reason why I feel yesterday's achievement was the greatest was majorly because the owners of those homes are not ordinary people. Not the normal citizens who normally have access to resources. These were just the people from the slums, people who have nothing, people, you know, who live from hand to mouth. That was the greatest moment.
How are the beneficiaries identified?
The beneficiaries were those people who lived in the slums. You know, there was no class of those people who were from outside, those who were living in the slums. Initially, the place where the homes were built used to be slums. And first, the government identified the people who were living in those slums. They vetted them, and then they removed them from that particular area and gave them some other makeshift homes to stay in until this particular project was complete. So once this project was complete, the very same people who had already been identified were moved. So those people were just ordinary people who were living in those, you remember how old those homes are. how those places they were living in. So I think the reason why I'm saying I was also one of those people who were really happy. I remember how the law, the kind of situation the law passed through, the kind of resistance. So many people actually met on this law. And the kind of stories people were making against the president and, of course, the law itself and parliament. So yesterday absorbed everybody.
Okay.
Because people owned homes, as from yesterday.
Right.
Ordinary people who never knew how a home like that one looked like. A shower, good shower, kitchen, access to all the other accessories like Wi-Fi, access to gas, and good things.
They have access to gas?
Yes.
Piped gas?
Piped gas. Every home in that particular setup.
What is the source of the piped gas?
Of course, there is an agreement between the energy, Ministry of Energy, and the housing, so that they pipe, each and every house has a piped gas. And you can pay depending on how you want to access. The gas is available? The gas is available. If you want to, and it's paid in terms of tokens, just like the electricity. If you want a gas of 1,000 shillings, you pay. Once the 1,000 shillings is over, houses have water, houses have Wi-Fi, houses have electricity, houses have everything. So,
okay. Yeah. All right. Chairman Chanzo, talk to us about what you made of yesterday and that question that Chairman of the Housing Committee at the National Assembly has not responded to about the promise versus the rate of delivery.
Now, thank you so much for this occasion. I think I want to tell you, sometimes somebody told me that there's no point of repeating things. But I want to tell you yourself, as the host of this team, and the person who had an idea to have this kind of facility, that it's very important. Because you see, there are things that we have read in books. We know them theoretically, but in practice. Because when you talk about the basics of human life, which started long ago, which people studied, this thing of food, shelter, and clothing. They go a long way, because you see, human nature has evolved. I was looking at, every time I look at this kind of clips, I look at Nairobi in the year 1905 or 6. It was like a Maasai village. I was looking at Mumias the other day, I think 1904 or something. It was like a desert. And it took an effort for people from outside, people to come and put their money here.
Right.
In order for it to become a city. So, one thing that I'm very happy about is that now, politically, we are almost able to talk the same language. Because this thing of housing, it was in President Uhuru and Ruto's manifesto. It was in Raila's manifesto.
Yep.
Now it was in Ruto's manifesto. But you remember the kind of opposition we are receiving about it. But now you can see that yesterday, just in a period of, these houses have been put up from 2022, and yesterday it was 1,080 being delivered on one site. So you can imagine if we had a lot of collaboration and a lot of support, and that's why I want to congratulate the people who are doing the job on the site, the contractor and the architects and the engineers who are supervising, because that's another problem. Because we have got 1 year, I don't want to talk about it now, but it was done in a hurry. Park Road.
Yeah.
I think it has, your people have even covered it, but we are trying to rectify the mistake that were made at design. You do investigation on the site first to see that it is proper. So I think this one has been done very well. You see, and it is also quite a number of stories.
Yeah.
Now, starting something is normally not very easy.
Yeah.
But the way I saw yesterday, and I think the way most of us saw, if we can be able to get the procurement process done well, and the supervision done well, also get good people. And that's why I'm very happy that I'm here with my colleagues here, the the president of the Executive Association of Kenya, and my brother here. I think we need to look at that aspect. You know, we have had a big problem in this country. Those people, they call them briefcase contractors, briefcase professionals, and so on.
Yeah.
But the way this project has been done, it is classic, and I think if we can just copy this, we'll be able to do much more.
So you say, when did this project begin?
2022.
Under which president?
It was this president.
Is it? I thought it was launched by President Uhuru Kenyatta.
It was launched, but it was commended by this president, this government.
Is that so, Chairman?
You know, initially the project was initiated by the previous regime, but there was no funds.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the previous regime relied on what we call voluntary contributions, and there was no money.
Yeah.
Until the entry of this government, when it now opted to pump funds on it. Otherwise, the project was initially initiated by the previous. Actually, it was the current deputy president, or when he was the deputy president, who also went there to do the initiation of that.
Okay, all right. I think we've seen a lot of clips all the way from 2018 to about 2021 of the efforts that are being made by the regime of President Uhuru Kenyatta. But Mr. President of the Architectural Association of Kenya, help us understand what he cites procurement as a challenge. What is the biggest difficulty in delivering a promise of 200,000 units as promised by the government when the president was campaigning?
Well, let me first start by saying that it was a good day for the political class, because when the political promises were given, and then if you have something to show for it, it's a good day for the political class. And when it comes to this issue of housing, I agree that the fact that it's now mainstream in our politics as a discussion, it's a good thing. Now, for me, the housing question is an urban question. So when we are looking at the deliverables, when we are looking at what we have gotten so far, we must be able to look at deeper and say what has been delivered. Okay, right now we are talking about numbers. We're talking about numbers. The numbers are that public sector delivers about 90% of housing. The government is struggling with 10%, and the government is targeting.
You mean private?
Private sector, sorry. Private sector is doing 90% of housing. Public sector, the government is able to. I'm calling it struggling because we are all agreeing that with 10%, and they are targeting the urban majority, which is about 60%, who are living in informal settlements, who are living in undignified housing. Now, if we look at the statistics today, this is the one that was launched yesterday, over 1,000 units in a scheme. Actually, I think it was the inception of the scheme was to 2017. It started 2018. And we are looking at, the target was, or rather that scheme has 13,000 unit plus. That is now, how many years is it now? I think we're talking about 7 years later.
Right.
We've delivered 1,000 units. I don't know how that is, if that was to be scaled. Maybe Prof can rate that as being a mwalimu.
Yes.
He can tell us how the score is. Yeah? and I think the most important thing we need to look at, we have not even started talking about the impact. When I say it's an urban issue, housing is 80 to 90% of our cities is actually housing. So if you sort out housing, you've sorted out the problem of urban areas. So I don't know, is Mukuru now sorted as an urban precinct of Nairobi? Because 13,000 is about 60,000 people. That is an average town in Kenya. That is the population of a town. So do we have all the other things tied in, the markets that the government is doing, social amenities, schools, open spaces, and all that? So for me, I look at it from that very big perspective.
Have we seen them? Have you seen schools?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, I'm asking rhetorically, but I'm actually saying also that when we are looking at this, the successes of these projects, should we count the number of houses, or should we count the impact in terms of the livelihoods that have been transformed, in terms of the way our urban areas are being transformed? So that for me would be how I would rate it in terms of, and I think it's clear that I haven't seen them. I would like to see that kind of thing as what we use as a yardstick, not the number of units that have been delivered.
Okay, good point. Prof, what do you make of this key achievement for the government?
No, thank you. The government indeed did make a great achievement yesterday, and as Waheshimiwa was highlighting. But as I mentioned just when I walked in, the government had promised to bring 1,000 camels, and yesterday the government appeared with 1 goat. He's an animal, nonetheless. He's alive, and the government is celebrating the arrival of 1 goat. And indeed, we have to celebrate because an animal was brought. But I think the government must go back and ask, what did it promise, to deliver? And if government didn't arrive with the camels, government should start asking, how come the camels didn't arrive? I think that's the honest conversation that we should be having. And that is the conversation that George has already put on the table. We are a serious country. If we promise to do something, and we are a serious people, if we promise to do something and we are not doing it, we should ask ourselves where the problem actually is. To put facts in perspective, in 2022, when this same project was being launched, 10 floors had already been cast. So really, I mean, let's also not distort facts. I think as responsible citizens...
10 floors?
Yes, 10 floors had been done.
Of how many blocks?
Of all the blocks. 10 floors had been done. And
of all the blocks launched yesterday?
Of the blocks launched yesterday. That had been done by 2022. Yes, so of course, a lot more work was done there and money was put. That one we are not disputing. As George has put it, and I was doing the maths, for Mukuru alone, we are at 8% of what was targeted within Mukuru. Of the entire affordable housing program, based on government's own numbers, Kenya Bureau of Statistics, not our own politics. Kenya National Bureau of Statistics report in May said that government had built 9,667 houses from 2022, not last year, from 2022, complete. Of course, government talks about 100,000 that is in the pipeline, but in terms of complete units, is 9,667 from a government source, not private source. By this year, we should be looking at 600,000 units, because government had said 250,000 per year. Scaled it down to 200,000, and we did accept that particular figure. That is one. Secondly, in terms of financing that particular figure, government put the housing levy. Mheshimiwa here and team did actually pass the Affordable Housing Act in Parliament. Right. And government does have the resources to do the number of houses that they said they would do. Where are those resources? Those resources are invested in the stock and the bonds market. Are we paying our taxes so that they can be invested in the stocks and the bonds market? We must ask ourselves, why can't government deliver what government said they would deliver? And to me, this is the crux of the conversation that we should be having. This is the crux of the conversation. Where are the problems? There are problems. We don't need to be dishonest about them. One very basic problem is access to land is really very difficult. It is true. Transferring land from one public agency to another is almost impossible in this country. It's a big choke point. Of course, the procurement issues that were being raised there, those then become issues and so on. But we need to audit ourselves and ask ourselves that, how come we're only doing 1%, in fact, it's 1.8% of what was promised, despite having the money. At some point, we disagreed with this model. But then we said, there's no problem, proceed. You said you'd do it, proceed and do it. You do actually have the resources. So government, we did actually say here that this country cannot actually absorb the numbers that government is putting in place. We did raise the issues of logistics. We've raised the issues of supply side. We've also raised the issues of demand side. In fact, if government had supplied these 600,000 houses, we'd be having another problem, because I don't really think we have effective demand for that number of houses within the country. Yeah, but what we should be asking ourselves is where is the problem and how can it actually be realistically addressed? And George started speaking to that to some degree. Yes. Whether we wait until Christ comes, government will not deliver these houses as they promised. But these houses can be delivered, but government cannot deliver them. The model that we're using for delivery of these houses is just totally wrong. The PS and I spent a lot of time in South Africa. I was working in housing still. I was teaching at the university. And we said, why don't we have this other model where rather than government delivering the houses and so on, government, struggling to find land, government, struggling to do procurement and all these sort of things, which governments all over the world, not just Kenyan government, are notoriously poor at. In fact, that's why they give up these things. Why not develop a framework and develop requirements and let private sector do everything? Let private sector package these houses. Okay. Let private sector, come with their own land. Let private sector come with their own development, and then basically government would guarantee offtakes, or in fact, or buy them. This whole idea that government can build houses is just flawed, and I'm sure 100%. I'm very sure the government will not do it. If I was in government, if I was Minister of Housing, if I was PS Housing, if I was President, and of Kenyan people's money, what we'll do, we'll develop a very clear terms of reference and ask the private sector who have been doing houses to give us, houses that meet particular requirements by government. Okay. Those houses will be there tomorrow. But the reason why government doesn't want to do it, and why you guys need to deal with that in Parliament, is because you want to eat the money. This model that I'm actually proposing, means that the only money that you get will be kickback from the guys.
Right. We will continue with this conversation to analyze.
I think...
Sorry, Chairman, I want to take a short break because it's 5 minutes after 7 o'clock, but you can share with us your feedback. There's someone here on X who is saying the following. This is Mwashira is saying, if there is no reliable water supply in South B and South C, where will Mukuru residents get their water from? The winners here are Mkokoteni water vendors. They will rip big. But I wonder, how do you get that water to 11th floor? We'll talk about that after the break. Stay tuned.